Liquid fuel stoves are the workhorse of the backcountry. Now they've fallen out of favor in the last several years because of the popularity of canister stoves, but there's still a really good use profile for a liquid fuel stove. For one, they do exceptionally well in cold weather, so any kind of winter trip, late season trip, they're really a good option. They work really well at altitude. They work really well when snow and ice are going to be your primary source of water. They melt snow and ice exceptionally well. The other nice thing about a liquid fuel stove is they can be repaired in the field. So, depending on the length of the trip and the remoteness of the trip, being able to troubleshoot and fix your stove, with just a small repair kit is critical to kind of keep you in the mountains. Now, they are a little bulkier. They do require the use of some of these pieces of tin. You do have to provide your own cook pot, and they're a little bit more involved to light. So they take a little bit longer. They take a little bit more finesse to really, light. But once you kind of figure that out, there's a really good there's a really good case for providing or using a liquid fuel stove, for those late season hunts. Now, these stoves generally run on what's called white gas. So some of the common names for white gas are Coleman fuel, Crown fuel, or MSR super fuel. It's a very clean burning, very hot burning fuel. That's a fuel that you're going to find predominantly in North America, and even more specifically the United States and Canada. But you may find yourself either overseas or in a remote part of Alaska or the Northwest Territories, as an example, where you can't find white gas. The nice thing about some of these liquid fuel stoves is they're called international stoves, and by just changing out the fuel jet, you're able to burn very common fuels that you could find in some of these remote places, like kerosene, diesel, and even unleaded gas. Now, those fuels are going to burn less efficiently, they're going to be dirtier, they're going to create more soot, and you're probably going to have to maintain your fuel jet a little bit more often than with white gas, but it provides you that opportunity to still have a stove that's going to function even in very remote areas. So the way this works is you fill the bottle with fuel, and there's actually a line on the outside that says fill line. You don't want to fill the bottle much above that fill line, and really why that's there is to remind you that there has to be a place in the bottle, an airspace in there, so that there's air to be pressurized, because that's how this stove is going to work. You're going to fill that bottle, you're going to put a pump on there, and then you're going to pressurize that bottle, and that pressure is what pushes fuel out the line. Now, that's what makes this such a great stove in the cold and at altitude, because as the pressure continues to go down, unlike a canister stove that we cannot regulate the pressure in the bottle, with a liquid fuel stove, you're able to continue to add pumps to keep the pressure up. So if you're at altitude or you're cold, the bottle goes from warm to cold, altitude goes up and down, whatever the case may be, you're able to burn almost all the fuel out of this bottle just by maintaining the pressure. So, you're able to light this stove, walk away. You can hear when the efficiency starts to go down. You can see it in the color of the flame, but you can come back, add a few more pumps, and everything continues, just the way it was. Now, lighting these is a little bit more involved, like I said. So generally with a canister stove, you turn it on, you put the lighter there, boom, you got the flame. These require some preheating, and what the preheating does is it allows you to bring some fuel into the stove. You turn the bottle off after you get a little fuel there, you light that, and what you're doing is you're warming up the fuel jet and the fuel line so that when gas does begin to come through, it's hot enough that that liquid is turned to a vapor or a gas, and boom, you get that really efficient flame. But in that preheating sequence, if you're not careful, you can get a little bit of a fireball. That fireball can be dangerous to your eyebrows, to your clothing. You never want to light these stoves inside a tent for carbon monoxide reasons as well as the flame. But you also want to be careful even if you're underneath tarps as an example, or even like low-hanging vegetation, that you don't get such a fireball, that you can, burn through the top of your tarp or, catch a tree on fire, etc. The nice thing about this is you're able to figure out fuel consumption pretty well. Unlike a canister stove where you're kind of guessing and have to base it on quite a bit of experience, for a liquid fuel stove, you're able to kind of calculate this out a little better. And, as a general rule, what we like to say is if you're above freezing, so above 32 degrees, and you're below 10,000 feet, and you've got a running water source. So generally with those kind of environmental conditions, you're going to have a running water source, so that means you're not going to use as much fuel. You should be able to get 4 to 6 ounces of fuel per person per day, so that's just for you. Now, that's just a place to start. There's been trips where I've been able to get away with less, and there's been trips where I actually had to use a little bit more. Now, if you're below freezing, so below 32 degrees, or above 10,000 feet, so definitely that increase in altitude. A lot of times you're going to have snow or ice as that water source. You're going to plan 6 to 8 ounces per person a day. So as an example, this is, I can get 24 ounces, of fuel in this bottle. So, if I'm going to burn 6 ounces a day, I can get 4 days of fuel out of this bottle for one person. So me and my partner would each carry a fuel bottle. And then one of us would carry the stove. So, it's critical that, that you burn test these stoves to figure out, kind of what that is. And I do this for all of my new stoves, or if it's a stove I haven't used in a while, and I'm going to go back and kind of do that, then I'm going to burn test. And what I would do is I would put, light the stove, I would put a pot of water on here, a liter of water, and I would see how long it takes to boil that liter of water. And so, you get a time of a couple minutes, and then I would go ahead and just burn the, without the pot on there, I just go ahead and burn the rest of that fuel bottle, keeping pressure up, and see how many minutes or an hour or whatever it is that I can get burn time out of that bottle. And then I can extrapolate, it takes me this long to do a liter of water, I have this much time in minutes of burn time in the bottle, and I can, figure out X number of liters for the trip. So, it's really easy to kind of figure that out. And then you just, fill up whatever amount of bottles you need, and you carry them on the trip. One thing that I like to do is I always keep fuel pumps on all my fuel bottles. And the reason I do this, and these are just some tips to kind of keep in mind with a liquid fuel stove is, because it's liquid, it can be spilled. That fuel can also contaminate, your dehydrated food or your food bars. It can get on your skin. It can actually become what's called supercooled. So it can actually be in really cold weather. It can be, even colder than freezing. So you can get contact frostbite. So to kind of prevent all that, every bottle that I carry in the field, I just keep a fuel pump on. And if that bottle gets burned down to nothing, then I just keep the fuel on, or the pump on, and then I go to the next bottle. And what that does is it prevents me from taking off different caps to put on different bottles, prevents me from spilling fuel, which if I don't have fuel, especially in the winter, it's going to drive me out of the mountains. When I pack these bottles, obviously I always make sure the bottle's closed, but I don't pack it next to my food bag. Only one time I think in 30 years have I had one of these bottles leak on me and contaminate my food. But it did happen, and because of that, it kind of affected the length of the trip. So, that's something to consider. The other one is, even though that these aren't as affected by cold as, say, a canister stove, you still want to put this, on some solid ground, a rock. You could put it on a snowshoe tail. You can take your foam ground pad, and you can place these stoves on top of the foam ground pad. It's not going to melt the foam ground pad. But if you are in snow, you kind of have to figure something out, because if you place the stove right on the snow, obviously it's going to heat up and just melt through the snow. So, you kind of have to figure that out, but that helps with efficiency as well. Again, you want to keep the pumps on all the bottles. One thing to keep in mind is some of the the cook pots from canister stoves, like the reactor cook pot, has a heat exchanger on the bottom, and that heat exchanger just increases surface area. So, you know, you could use a reactor cook pot with one of these stoves to kind of increase the efficiency of the burn time. Again, if you're going to do that, you should burn test and calculate, you know, kind of with that figured out. And then lastly, whatever the cook pot is, because generally these are going to be a little bigger, you know, because we're going to be melting snow, it's going to be in the winter, etc., that you never want to put an empty cook pot in your pack, right? So you want to make sure that you're going to pack your stove inside here, maybe your lighter, maybe a dehydrated meal. You know, when you take this cook pot out of your pack, what are the things you're going to want to go with it? And generally speaking, those are like stove, lighter, food, you know, maybe your spoon, you know, but make sure you always have something in that cook pot, because those are, you know, precious cubic inches that you don't want to give up. So, you know, again, these stoves have kind of fallen a little bit out of favor, but I think that if you're going out in the winter, if you're going out in these late seasons, if you're going out in inclement weather, there's really a good use case for a liquid fuel stove that I think people should consider, so that you've got the right tool for the right job, for the right time of year and the right activity.